Very good, everybody. My name is Kenny. I'm an alcoholic. I'm really happy to be here at Winter Holidays. This is a convention that's been a part of my sobriety since the very beginning. I'm really thrilled that Winter Holidays is back in downtown Seattle again, which is where it was when I got sober. My sobriety date's June 8th of 1989, and my home group is Empire Way. Empire Way is going to be doing a panel here in a little bit, so I hope you'll all come at noon to hear the Empire Way folks. I believe Shannon's going to be passing out a basket that has some questions. They'll have two 30-minute speakers, and I'm happy to be on a panel. It's AA Al-Anon panel, too. That's just fantastic to me. It's something that's really close to my heart. So I'll start off by saying go Seahawks. I think that's appropriate. What a fantastic weekend for a conference here. I had the pleasure to pick up our Friday night speaker last night, Lee. And I picked him up, and he came in, and we of course, I started talking about Seahawks right away. What a great weekend it's going to be in Seattle, and he happened to mention that he's kind of an AFC guy, a Charger fan, kind of an AFC guy, and you know, he mentioned that there was some potential possibility that Denver might have a chance in this game, and I told him, hey, you might just want to keep that to yourself there, buddy, you know. So anyways, the theme of this panel here today is in all our relationships. So generally, I think we think about relationships in terms of a partnership with another human being, and often they're sexual relationships, but in all our relationships, we have relationships in our work life, in our family life, in our community life, in our AA life, which is I consider kind of part of the community life that we have. The thing that I thought about here is that I want to make clear that it's AA is a way of life, and I bring a big book up with me when I talk, and I probably won't even open this big book here today, but I just do it because it reminds me to talk about what's important and why I'm here, because I could get carried away and start telling stories and forget about and have too much fun, which hopefully we'll have some fun here too. But I like to have the book with me because I'm really a person of a mindset that when somebody comes to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or comes to an Alcoholics Anonymous convention like this, they ought to hear about the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I think is most aptly contained in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what people ought to hear, that we owe that to people that come in to hear that there's a good, strong solution in here. But the first thing I'll do is quote from one of our other pieces of literature, which is the 12 and 12, which talks about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are a set of principles, spiritual in their nature, that when practiced as a way of life, they will expel the obsession to drink and render the sufferer happy and usefully whole. It's really the best phrase. It's almost poetic to me. It's the best phrase that I've encountered that really encompasses in such a few words, in such a masterly way, what the AA way of life really is. That's why we're talking about in all our relationships. This is to be practiced as a way of life. If it was, and thank God, I've been a person that's been a great benefit of some amazing sponsorship and amazing mentors in AA and in the spiritual life in general that have, brought this stuff to my attention that just because we're in a meeting doesn't mean we're in the solution. And that the solution isn't in the meeting. It was for me in the beginning, and I don't want to take this too out of context, because in the beginning I was so out of my mind, I just had to sit in 4 or 5 meetings a day. And luckily I lived in an area where that was going on, and I had the ability to do that. But at some point, the solution has to be in Kenny. It can't be in the meetings, because if it's in the meetings, when I leave the meetings, how am I going to practice this way of life in all my relationships? That solution had to be, somehow I had to find a way for that solution to become a part of who I was. And I am a person that considers myself now, it's a funny word, but I consider myself a AA devotee. And I got that word from my mother. My mother's devotee of the Ram Dass, for those of you that know what that means. And she, when she first told me that she was going to do this, that she'd been accepted by the Ram Dass as a devotee, and he accepted the responsibility of becoming her guru, then she called and she told me about that, and I was interested. Well, what does that really mean, the devotee? It means that you practice a set of principles in your life. It's a way of life. It's not just, I really like this guy, or I like what he reads. This is, I'm going to devote myself to this way of life. And I've really unconsciously, somehow through the years, I think I've become an AA devotee. It means that it's not a step that I work. It's a part of who I am. It means that when I'm dealing with resentments, I put them on paper. It means when I'm in fear, I ask God to remove that fear and direct my attention, my consciousness, to what He would have me be. It means when I'm wrong, I promptly admit it. And make amends quickly when I've harmed somebody. It means that I practice a way of life of self-sacrifice and service to others, that I try to live in this constant thought of others and how I can help to meet their needs. And as I've done that in these different areas of my life, there's these particular areas of our life when we're practicing these principles. There's these areas of our life that are particularly problematic to us. In our traditions, they call it money, property, and prestige. Those are the things that get in the way of me practicing and being devoted to the AA way of life. Money, property, and prestige. In the 12 and 12, they call it sex. There's 3 areas that they really focus on there. They focus on these AA, not AA, they focus on these God-given instincts for sex. It means it's God-given and therefore good. Security, which means that if I didn't have this instinct for security and stock up a little bit for the winter and have some heat in my house and have a place to go, I would start suffering from the elements. And I need a certain amount of security. And society is the other one. And society is kind of interwoven in the 12 and 12 with prestige. That we need to be well and whole. We need to have a way of life that we practice that is that allows us to have a place in society. There's been a lot of studies. Children that don't get loving touching when they're young, begin to rock and suffer. People that are left all alone. That's why we have this huge fear. Our biggest fear is that I'm going to be alone, or that I'm going to die alone, or that I'm going to be alone and in pain. Those are these core fears that we have, and that through the looking at those, it says that those are all God-given things. These desires. It's just that, especially as alcoholics, where the big book says that for alcoholics we're extreme examples of self-will run riot. It means that if you have the bar graph of the examples of self-will run riot. You have some people that are kind of right down the middle, maybe your average self-will run riot guy. And then you've got on one end of the spectrum, way over here, is like a Mother Teresa that doesn't even hardly belong on the scale. And on the other end, the extreme end, you've got the alcoholic. And what the 12 and 12 tells us is that we demand more than our fair share of all of those things. That's where we get in trouble. I demand more than my fair share of sex, security, and society. And religious people for generations have recognized this. You know, for several thousand years they've recognized this. That's why people they recognize, okay, if I'm going to really devote myself to this way of life, then I'm going to have to take some vows because I got to get rid of this stuff. That's why people take vows of chastity and vows of poverty and vows of obedience, sex, security, and society. They're not new ideas. Now, when I looked at that, the idea of taking a vow of chastity wasn't very attractive to me. So I got to find a way to bring this into balance so that I can be in a relationship with another human being and not cause a lot of suffering because of this more mentality that we alcoholics have in all these areas of our lives. And so I'll tell you just a few things that have gone on with me and I'll just tell you it's really nice in a way for me because I owe everything I've got to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the God's truth, that I had absolutely nothing when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was homeless. I was suffering from mental illness. I wasn't, I didn't have my right mind. I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have a job. My mother, nobody in my family would return phone calls. I didn't have a single friend that I thought would answer the phone. And I walked into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting like that. And I sat down in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and I broke down in tears in an AA meeting, my first AA meeting. And some guys drove me to detox on June 8th of 1989. And that's how I came to you. But through the practice of this life, I got back into a business that I'd been in for many years. I was in the fishing business. I fished up in Alaska. And I'm still in that business today. I don't go fishing anymore, but I run a fishing company. And I just loved it. I got to work with these guys that were, it was the first men that I'd ever been able to work with in my life. I just didn't have any male role models in my life. And these guys on the boat, they were hard charging, and it wasn't about working hard, playing hard. It was about playing hard while we worked. We just worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we played the whole time, and we were off the hook with drugs and alcohol. We drank around the clock, and we'd work in these really dangerous conditions, just drunk out of our mind. And it's just a miracle that more people didn't get hurt or killed during that time. And luckily, that the Coast Guard and other people really cleaned the industry up, and those kind of shenanigans are rare nowadays rather than the norm. But there was something about my drinking. There was an urgency about the way that I drank and used drugs that these guys that I worked with paid to put me through treatment twice. These people that I was partying with on the boats. And then they fired me when I came out of treatment and got loaded. And I had I went 3 years with no job. But I got back into the industry about 6 months sober. I made an amends, and I let some people know that I was sober again, and I got it. They said, geez, we can't really give you the kind of responsibility you had before, but we can, you can come down and kind of work on the boat, or help us get ready for town, but we can't take you out. And I did that, and one thing led to another. I met a guy that was going to build a brand new boat, and he hired me, and probably kind of blindly hired me, honestly, about a year sober, and ended up working at that company for 17 years. And one thing about, if you practice these principles in all your affairs and all your relationships, you got to be a little careful, because people will give you more responsibility than you even want. But I worked for that company for 17 years, and I became the general manager of that company. There came a time when I thought, well, geez, I've kind of run the course here, and I've done everything, and I had this other opportunity, and I left that job, announced to them that I was going to be leaving, and I actually went to the principals in the company and told them, I've got this opportunity, I'd really like to do it, and I'd like your blessing, and they said, well, let us think about it, and they came back and said, we'd like to support you in doing this, and they had a party for me. I quit my job, and they had a party. And one of our big chief engineers, a guy from one of the boats, was there, and he cried when he was talking about me leaving the company. And I left and went to work for another group for 4 years, and I had an assistant there that worked with me, and I left that company a year and a half ago. Same thing, another opportunity came up, and the same thing there. They had a big lunch. This woman that had been my assistant for the years openly cried that I was leaving. She told me, I don't know what I'm going to do, and just this fantastic opportunity in life, and I moved. I'm the president and CEO of a big company now. We have agriculture holdings and timber holdings and fisheries, and I work as an advisor to the governor of Washington State on fisheries and natural resource matters. It's just amazing, And the thing about it really was this, just practicing these AA principles. When I first got this job, I went to work as an executive director, and I worked as a lobbyist on behalf of the fishing industry for a few years. And I went to him, and the job was we had these 16 companies. And now we're boiled down to 11, but we had 16 companies that needed to really start cooperating, because there just wasn't enough market share for everybody, so we were going to have to buy. Everybody was going to go down, and it was just a perfect deal. And I just, I was representing my company that I was the general manager of in those meetings, and I just used these AA principles. People would be arguing, I'd say, it seems to me that our unity here is what's important. That as individuals, we're going to perish. That we have to find a way to unify this group. And we'd have votes that would be 6 votes to 5. And I'd bring up the fact that we need to always strive for substantial unanimity when we vote, because the only thing this vote means is that 5 people are going to walk away upset. And that's, if we're going to really cooperate, we can't do that. These are AA principles. And these guys would just say, wow, where did this guy go to business school? This is amazing. These guys are attorneys and presidents of companies, and I've had the chance to do that. Just really an amazing turn of events, and part of that too is, and I think it's really important to recognize this, is that somehow, I suffered from this obsession for more for years. The last 3 years of my drinking, there was none of this camaraderie with friends and the feeling that life was good. There was a time in my drinking I would hug my friends and tell them I loved them, and we just had great heartfelt connections with each other, and I knew everybody had my back and I had their back. It really was great. We were out of control, and we were going to jail, and all kinds of bad things were happening, but there was this real camaraderie. But those last 3 years of my drinking, all of that was gone. The only thing that was left was this obsession for more. That if I could somehow just get enough in, I would be able to take this deep breath. And from there, I'd be able to figure out how I was going to stop. And the point that I'm making and how that connects with practicing these principles in all our relationships is that it's amazing the transformative. This is the part of why I bring my big book up to remember what I'm supposed to be talking about. The transformative nature of these principles and our steps and our traditions in the human life, and how amazing that is, that when we practice these steps and the obsession to destroy ourselves with booze and drugs is removed, it's amazing what you find. I've seen people that became, one of the guys, very first guy that ever took me through this book became a really amazing artist and had a lot of success and has traveled the world. And, and when that obsession was removed from me, who knew? I ended up being a guy that had abilities to figure out things in business. And I've had some success there. And people become great fathers and husbands and wives, and I have a daughter who's 22 now. She's going to graduate from Evergreen State College here in Washington, where she's as near as I can tell, she's studying to be an anarchist. And but this is just brand new this morning. It's brand new this morning in my meditation. She's a senior in college. She's been sober my entire life. Shannon and I have been married for 15 years. We've been together 17 years. My daughter came to live with us when she was 5. Shannon and I raised her. She's 22 now. She's a senior. And she's told us that she wants to take a year off between graduating and going to graduate school, which I think is a great idea. And she's told me that she's going to be coming back to Seattle, but she hasn't told me. I think she told Shannon, but she hasn't told me yet that she's going to be, what that means is that she's going to be moving back into the house for a year. She hasn't told me that. And it's brand new. In meditation today, it came to me that she hasn't told me, and that I need to call her and tell her, I don't know what you're planning to do that year, but it would really mean a lot to me if you would consider coming back and living at home for a year. So I didn't mean to get all. I said something about we're going to have some fun here. So, but these kind of things we get in Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't been a perfect father. I've lost my temper a few times, but my daughter's told me, over the years, she's been there almost the whole time that I've been sober. I'm sober 24 years. She's 22 years old. She's been there the whole time, and she's told me, she says, "Man, you've really calmed down over the years. You really are." She tells me this, "You're a lot different than you used to be," and we do have a lot of fun. And Shannon and I, we adopted a boy. He was the son of a woman that I sponsored, and his dad had died of a heroin overdose, and his mother passed away sober from AIDS when I was her sponsor. And Shannon and I adopted her son when she left us and raised him. And he's 26 now. He's off living in Montana and snowboarding and having a good time. And I've been sober so long, I get kind of naive, and I'm telling him he fishes up in Alaska, so he's got some money. He's snowboarding for the season, and I'm talking to him, and he tells me, I says, "Well, tell me about the house you're living in there in Montana." And he tells me a little bit about it. And what kind of neighborhood is it? He tells me about it's on a little cul-de-sac. And he says there's 7 of us living in the house, and we snowboard all day. And then the one guy's a DJ at the club. He goes down and plays rap music. And then after the club closes, we all come back here. We got a hot tub, and we have parties. And he's telling me, so I'm still not getting it, right? I'm just like so naive, so I said, well, Jake, how's your neighbors? He says, oh, they're all right. And I said, well, are you getting to know them? Kind of getting to know your neighbors a little bit? And he said, Dad, we're not exactly held in high esteem by the neighbors, he says. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, 7 guys living in a house, coming back, partying all night. I get it. So, we have a good time, and he shows up on Mother's Day, gives Shannon, flowers, and we have a tradition. I make this huge peace sign that I put on top of my house for Christmas every year. That's a tradition that he and I started. We started trying to make a little one, and then made bigger and bigger and bigger ones. The first year we made one, my neighbor came over and said, "Did you guys get a Mercedes?" And I said, because I forgot to put the little line down on the middle part there. So, but we've got bigger and bigger. Now we've got this 11-foot peace sign that sits. We got to build a big foundation for it. You can literally see it for a couple miles, and so we've got bigger and bigger. But he drove all the way from Missoula, Montana, to come out and make the peace sign this year. And I said, "Oh man, you don't have to do that, Jake." He said, "I wouldn't miss that for everything in the world." Came out, and he's just, we're just so fortunate here in AA, and I've got a few minutes here left, and I'll talk about the relationship that I have with my wife Shannon, which we call her the beautiful and wonderful Shan. And for those of you that know her, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just an amazing thing, and people do ask us a lot, like, what is it about your relationship? You guys seem so happy, and we have a hard time really putting it into words. Like for us to do a workshop on relationships or something, which we've been asked to do a few times, we come up with something, but it's really hard because I think it's just this, when you're practicing these principles and your focus is this way towards, a relationship with this power greater than yourself, instead of trying to seek everything you need by, I'm going to get everything I need from this person and she's going to get everything we need. And our 10-year anniversary, I wrote a book called The Care and Keeping of a Shan, and a lady that's a art teacher here in Seattle at one of the high schools is also a member in AA, and she illustrated the book for us, and I got it published in bound, and I gave that to her on one of our anniversaries, and it's just really great. And I showed it to a few of my friends, and they just said, it talks about making coffee in the morning and what we do at night, and just little things that you got to do to care and keep from a Shan, keep the temperature just right. And if you live in Seattle, you're going to have to get a Shan out into the sun, at least a couple times a year. And when she comes home, and her hairdresser's in the crowd here, so I got to be a little careful. But when she comes home and says, "Gosh, I got this beautiful haircut," and she says, "Well, it was only like $300, and I just got it." And I say, "Wow, man, what a bargain! That's just fantastic." And so I put this stuff in a book, and a couple of my sponsees read it, and they said, "Listen, Kenny, after the meeting, we're going to take you out in the parking lot. We're going to beat you within an inch of your life. You've ruined it for everybody." So, we have a really, really amazing time with all this, and it's just such a great honor to get to share some of this with you. And my 30 minutes is just about up, and again, I just say to if you're here and you have that obsession and you haven't yet found an answer for that, it's important for me to say that I'd love to talk to you after the meeting here today and share with you a little bit more about my life. So thank you so much.